Good morning, it's Dr. Charlotte Hodges, and I feel like it's been a little while since I made some of these videos. I am just out for my morning walk, getting a little vitamin D, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about antibodies, herd immunity, and vaccines. And I thought that this might be a very relative topic to the times right now. I've been getting a lot of emails and updates from TMA, that's the Texas Medical Association, reading JAMA articles. JAMA is the Journal of the American Medical Association, and just general medical updates pertaining to where we are with development of the COVID-19 vaccine, and also, interestingly enough, how we're going to go about distributing the vaccine. So even though I realize that this can be a very scary time for many people, I also want you to know it is actually a very exciting time. We are going to beat this together, and we just need to stand firm, and we can do this. I know that we can. So today I wanted to talk about, how do we get immune, and what is the importance of herd immunity? But I think before I just discuss what that is and define what herd immunity is, let's just define immunity. So when somebody becomes immune to a disease, that means that their body has been able to mount basically a permanent response to that disease, so they can either overcome that disease or really just to keep from getting infected in the first place. And the little guys in your body that are the war horses, so to speak, those are called antibodies. So if you have enough antibodies, or if you just have antibodies to a particular disease that your body has created, then typically you will not get infected, or should you get infected, you'll be able to mount a proper response. So how do we get antibodies? Well, there's two basic ways to get antibodies. The first way, which is how I got mine to chickenpox, is a person that has never been exposed to a particular disease, is exposed, that person fights the disease, and the body develops antibodies so that that disease can be overcome by the body. For example, whenever I think I was like 3 or 4, I remember, I barely remember this, but I just certainly have pictures. It was Easter time, and my brother and I are both like covered in little chicken pox while we were dyeing Easter eggs. It was the red dots and all the calamine lotion, since they were so itchy. So for me, I was able to develop antibodies to the varicella virus by being exposed to chickenpox when I had previously not been exposed to them before. So that's the first way to develop an antibody. The second way to develop antibodies and to mount a response or immune response is simply by receiving a vaccine. So for instance, my daughter, she's 5. Instead of her having to go through the pain and suffering, and us going through the pain and suffering of her developing chickenpox, there are a series of vaccines that she has had to get. I believe you get your first varicella vaccine at around age 1, and then you have to get your second series between ages 4 and 6. So millions of parents no longer have to use calamine lotion all over their kids to give them relief from chickenpox. So that would be the second way. So you can either get exposed to a disease, number 1, to develop immunity, or number 2, you can just receive a vaccine. And vaccines, there are a variety of different types of vaccines. Most of the time they're using like a viral particle, not really an active virus. That way your body can mount an immune response to that particular portion of the virus that the body sees as foreign, without you actually becoming infected. So does that kind of make sense? Now you guys can all get those questions right on Trivial Pursuit on what immunity is and how your body basically makes antibodies. So how does this pertain to COVID-19, and how does this pertain to herd immunity and what is the importance of herd immunity. So when you are in any given population, you know, we're always trying to make sure that our kids in school get their school vaccines, and that is because they have not developed a really strong immune response. And it's important because in any given population or herd, to make sure that a disease does not spread, you need to have a specific number of people that have an immunity to a disease. For instance, with the measles, you need to have about 95% of the population either vaccinated or have suffered from the measles and then developed their own response to it. You have to have 90% of the population that are immune to the disease to keep that disease from spreading into a global pandemic. And every disease has its own herd threshold. I believe for polio, for herd immunity, you need to have at 80% of the herd immune to that particular disease. So how does this pertain to COVID? What can we do, or what immunity threshold do we need to get so that this pandemic can end or slow at the very least? And right now that's the $1 million question. We don't know. I think initially the thought was that with this particular disease, it was going to need to be very similar to polio, and certainly maybe even like the measles, that you would have to have a significant portion of the population to be immune to the disease to be able to stop the spread. Okay. I have read some more papers here recently that we might only need 50 to 60% of the population to have developed an immune response to slow and or stop the spread of COVID-19. But again, these studies are still ongoing. There's still so much to learn. So why is herd immunity important for a disease? The idea about herd immunity is that you're going to have enough people in a given area that have mounted an immune response, either through personal exposure or through a vaccine, so that there's not going to be a spread of that disease to vulnerable populations in the area. And that's why, like in certain parts of the United States, with different, I think in the Northeast, there was like a certain religious population, and they're kind of fairly closed off. They don't take vaccines, and there was a measles outbreak. And the reason why it spread so quickly through their area is that no one had been exposed and nobody had received a vaccine. So everybody was susceptible to the disease. And that is why it is so very important that, not just for COVID-19, but for all these diseases, if we have a vaccine for it, you need to go get your vaccine. I know that there are some pundits out there that are worried about vaccines for their children. That is incorrect. You need to go get your children vaccinated on their vaccination schedule, not just for your child, but frankly also to protect the other children that are there at school. Because if more of kids at school have their vaccines, then that decreases the risk for any given disease to be spread more rapidly through the school. So does that kind of make sense? So herd immunity, it's good. How do we get herd immunity? You either get exposed or you get a vaccine. So early on with the COVID-19 epidemic, the question came up, how do we achieve herd immunity? And I mean, we have hundreds of millions of people that live in the United States. And at the beginning and onset of this disease, I mean, the death rate was higher. We didn't really know how to treat it. I mean, those things have totally flipped now. Patients are getting treated very well. The majority of people just only have mild or moderate symptoms. and they're able to pull through. But early on, we didn't know what this was. And the thought that, let's say how many people are in the US? 300 to 400 million people. I mean, even if we thought that we needed half of the population to be immune to the disease, that would mean we'd need like 150 to 200 million people infected. I don't think we want that many people infected with any disease, and certainly not one as unknown as COVID-19. So achieving herd immunity simply through exposure, that is not a good health plan. That is not what any country needs. And that is why we have the race to a vaccine, because the best way to achieve herd immunity is if we can get a good vaccine that we can send out to the masses so that people can be protected. And then if there are enough people that are protected, then people that are unable to receive the vaccine for whatever reason, if they're immunocompromised, if they have an allergy to maybe some of the components in the vaccine itself that are not active, it's like the inert ingredients. For those vulnerable populations, they'll be protected because there's so many people that already have immunity to the disease. So I want you guys just to keep up the faith, keep up the fight. We will soon have a vaccine. I mean, in the coming weeks, in the coming months, pardon me, you'll be receiving more and more updates and news casts on where we are with the vaccine. I encourage you to go to either the CDC or really the World Health Organization to get some very good science-based information. There's also, I believe there's the Presidential Task Force as well. I was actually very excited to see that there's the race for the vaccine, and then I read several papers on the race for transport of the vaccine, and I was really impressed to see that there is now a whole series of engineering developments, because typically with a vaccine, ooh, it's going to be a little loud. Typically with a vaccine, they have to be stored cool, and so there have been numerous strides in how do we keep these vaccines cold so that they can be transported all over the world. So even though it's scary times, it's also very exciting times. And I just encourage you guys to know that we will get through this. And when you're looking for good information, I want you to look for good, sound, science-backed information. Because much like my bariatric patients, there's a lot of bad information about weight loss and bariatric surgery. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of very bad information, not just about COVID-19, but also about COVID-19 vaccines as well. So go out, get vaccinated. In the state of Texas, there's also a vaccine registry. I'm going to do another little post just for folks that live in Texas, how you can get registered for the Texas Vaccine Registry, and keep up the fight. Bye.